WandaVision episode 8. This episode, I actually like a certain element of this because this felt like a comic book, actually. This felt like a comic book where you go into someone's backstory, and that's what we did in WandaVision, which I really liked, actually. I think I'm more connected to the ones that are more like comic books and less the ones that are like sitcoms, because it doesn't always 100% work with that stuff. And structurally, I actually really liked it. But I did feel like this was an episode that was trying to justify an entire season rather than something that I think had... I felt like there were too many times where it started justifying and explaining so much of this. And I don't think I was as emotionally connected as everyone else seems to be with this episode. I think it was very deep in a lot of what it's doing, but I think they sort of messed up something pretty major with this. Because we look at the MCU, and we look at Marvel, and all this stuff is based on continuity and our past knowledge and our connection to these characters. And with Wanda and Vision, it feels like we didn't get that connection. They'll reference certain memories, certain moments, certain character things we're used to. In this, it just feels like we're not getting the moment where Thanos kills Vision. We're not going back to that. We're not going back to parts from the movies that we know. It's sort of inventing all these things. And although I think the Vision quote is very moving, it did feel like from a writing thing that they are very much trying to fill in gaps, and us as the audience are filling in holes that naturally we should not be doing. The storytelling should be filling in. And they're doing things that don't connect anywhere, particularly the beginning, where we talk about Agatha at the beginning of the episode. You could have cut that out. Like, you could have gone to the bathroom. You wouldn't, because you can pause things. But in theory, you could have gone to the bathroom, come back, and be like, did I miss anything? And you go, oh, and they'll be like, shut up, don't worry about it. And like, it didn't affect the entire episode. Like, why have that in there? And it did feel like a lot of what this was doing is either connecting loose threads, explaining the sitcom thing, which I didn't think it needed to do, and just like explaining stuff. And I didn't really like that element to it. And I think it like calls on what I don't like about the show is that it's not really like coming from a real place of knowing these characters, which I think is like sort of like makes us a weird outlier in terms of like what the MCU does so great is it connects to our past relationships to them. We have revelations like, oh, of course Tony Stark would do that, or of course Captain America would do that. In this, it's no like, of course Wanda would do that. And it feels awkward and weird in a lot of places, although I do think this was a more true to what they should have done a while ago. But it's also like, was there a part in Civil War where she's like, man, I love watching DVD sets of sitcoms and stuff? It just like, that's always been my thing with the show. It's like this stray character thing that clearly the writers wanted to do, but it like, I wish there had been like sort of a connection there. I do like this episode more, and I did sort of like what they were doing with it. I liked how moving it was in certain parts. I just wish the narrative had been set up properly, and I feel bad because I know everyone's getting very emotional and loves the show so much, but it feels like a lot of what they're doing sometimes is more for people to look into and understand all these symbols for it rather than properly saying the things they need to. And it feels like kind of like oddly not connecting to what these kind of characters and what the storytelling is. And it's more asking the audience to fill in these things like, isn't it cool with the sitcoms? It just like, it does like, let's do the cool thing or let's reference this thing, but it's not connecting to it in a way that we know and we understand through the characters that we've known through several movies. And I get that like people like sitcoms, like those shows, and maybe like that's been planned, but we didn't see it. I just feel like a lot of like them bringing up like the thing with her parents and everything like that. I did like finding out like she was a mutant before. I thought like that was like, okay, that I liked. Like there's certain connection things I like, but I also like, I've heard people say that they wouldn't want to watch this outside of how we're watching it now in a weekly format. Like it wouldn't work in a binge, like you'd question more things. And I sort of believe that, like it wouldn't, I don't know. I also am like, where's Monica this whole time? Like what happened to her? But I'm a 90s kid, and White Vision at the end was pretty cool. I grew up with White Vision. That was my vision when I was a kid. So I still feel like a lot of this is referencing things and sort of confusing you into believing it's more of a narrative connection than it necessarily is. I felt like this worked a little better than it in its sort of awkward way. But I just, from a storytelling perspective, it continues to be a show that's very awkward fit into the TV format. I wish someone who's maybe a better writer had taken on this show. There's like certain episodes, like it felt like they stayed in the sitcom world a little too long, where you're like, where are we going with this? Like, it's not done like an arty, strange way. Like, it's not like Kelly Reichardt or something where I'm like, oh, well, this silence and this movement says so much. Like, it just felt like they don't know what they're doing, and they don't connect to it. And like, I just feel like the MCU has very literal place in how it does characters and storytelling and plotting, and the show continues to like not want to do that. And it's like kind of this awkward thing where it's like, it's not that I can't accept TV or I'm too stupid or I don't deserve it and all those things. I think it is just like the show like didn't really think out itself the way like the planning of the MC usually works in terms of its plotting. So I don't like that, but I did like how it talked about grief and moving on and things like that. And I like the quote from Vision. I was not as emotional as everyone else, I'm sorry, but I was more excited to watch the next one. But I am also like, what's going on with Monica, what's going on with Pietro, what's going on with the twins and everything like that. But I'm a little more excited for any of the other Marvel shows to have more of a kind of straight forward kind of lesson and things like that. And I feel like the WandaVision thing, it's a little too muddled for me, and the character motivations are supposed to have sort of a connection to what's going on. They clearly want to illustrate that to what's going on with the sitcom world, and I wish there's more of a connection with that. And obviously I've read about how the Dick Van Dyke episode, which I've seen before, and I thought, oh, is that what they're doing? How that's an episode about a dream and how people were watching TV and a dream that was caused because of TV shows, and how that's her favorite episode and how that says so much. I thought that was actually very clever. The Dick Van Dyke Show is awesome. You should check it. Seriously, the Dick Van Dyke Show is great. I shouldn't, like, if you're watching anything because of it, it's the Dick Van Dyke Show. I know you all probably hate me for not liking it as much as everyone else. So, but I'm actually still excited for Falcon Winter Soldier, to be honest with you. But I continue to not love it as much. But I think this episode was probably more interesting. And I almost wish this had been the first episode, to be honest with you. Would that have worked better if we had seen her connection at the beginning rather than this sort of like ending kind of thing? Like, structurally, what if we had this at the beginning when we understood like what it meant to her and her family, all those things? Like, I feel like that might have worked a little better. Now that I think about it, actually it would. Fuck. Then it would have been darker, and it would have had a whole new thing to the whole thing. So anyway, whatever. I'm still interested in the show, and I like kind of, this one was maybe my favorite episode. I think it's probably the best episode, and I think because it felt like the weirdness that comics got into with magic and everything like that. Also, that is clearly the Scarlet Witch and not Dark Phoenix. And obviously they're doing the retcon where she is not a mutant, because that's like what they're doing, obviously. And I don't think this is not a backdoor pilot into the X-Men. This is a funky show, and I'm sorry the episode reviews for this are not, I think, what people expect they want them to be. But I don't think I'm as on board with the storytelling in this as most people. And I know people love it. I know people in the chat I've heard from, I know they love it, so I apologize. But I just feel like this show is leading an interesting way towards the end, but I just think the structure is just becoming a bigger and bigger issue because, you know, as Billy Wilder said, you don't have third act problems, you have first act problems, and that's been obvious from the beginning.